You're essentially steering straight into a financial storm far more violent than most people realize, even though it has already crashed onto shore. Meanwhile, many major news outlets are still downplaying it, describing the situation as if it were nothing more than a breezy summer drizzle. Maybe you've glanced outside and noticed for sale signs hanging around longer than they used to. Or perhaps your Zillow alerts keep pinging you with fresh price reductions. What you're observing, though, is barely the surface. Just a small glimpse of something much larger and far more serious. We're not waiting for a housing correction to show up in 2026. We've already stepped into the early scenes of a downturn that, according to several mathematical forecasts, could rival, and in some areas even surpass, the chaos of the 2008 collapse. This isn't about stirring fear. It's about knowing what's coming so you can prepare. National data averages may try to soften the blow, but certain neighborhoods are already watching their equity leak out at a pace that's terrifying for homeowners and financially crippling for investors. So today, we're taking a hard, numbers-focused road trip across America, stopping in 10 cities where the floor hasn't just weakened, it has given out completely. We'll dig into inventory levels soaring to heights not seen in years, rising foreclosure initiations that aren't making headlines yet, and the thousands of dollars sellers are shaving off their listing prices just to attract a single offer. From a sunny coastal hotspot that insurers are beginning to abandon, to a technology center where multi-million-dollar properties are sitting vacant, we're going to uncover the decay hiding beneath the surface. By the time we arrive at the #1 market on this list, you'll understand exactly why savvy investors are pulling their money back and waiting on the sidelines. And before we hit the road to explore these faltering markets, make sure you're subscribed if you want to stay informed about what's really happening in this economy. Number 10. Tampa, Florida. Our first stop brings us to the Sunshine State, landing in a city that practically became the mascot of the pandemic-era migration surge. As you roll through Tampa's palm-lined streets, you can still sense traces of the buying mania that swept through just a couple of years back. But that electricity in the air has shifted. What once felt like excitement now carries a heavy undercurrent of worry. One of the first things that hits you is the mountain of unsold homes baking under the Florida sun. Recent Redfin data reveals that active listings across the Tampa metro have exploded by almost 40% compared to last year. A jaw-dropping jump that points to a market where demand has all but evaporated. Buyers aren't just hesitating. Many have effectively walked away altogether, squeezed out by punishing interest rates and an insurance crisis spiraling far beyond what most expected. Reports show that homeowners in this area are dealing with insurance premiums that have tripled or even quadrupled in just 3 years. That means thousands of dollars in added monthly costs, expenses that never appear in a typical mortgage calculator. This silent surge in housing costs crushes the debt-to-income ratios of everyday families and has driven countless would-be buyers out of the lending pool entirely. Price cuts, once rare here, have now become part of the landscape. Realtor.com data indicates that more than 28% of all active Tampa listings have slashed their asking price in the last 30 days. That's nearly 1 out of every 3 sellers admitting they priced their homes based on a fantasy from the past rather than the market in front of them today. Bidding wars, once the norm, feel like ancient history. In their place, desperate sellers are offering concessions we haven't seen in years. Things like seller-paid rate buydowns just to get someone to sign a contract. Local real estate boards are also reporting a decline of over 12% in closed sales compared to this time last year. Inventory is stacking up, and months of supply are drifting into territory that typically signals the arrival of a buyer's market. Investors who scooped up properties hoping for lucrative short-term rental income are now staring down vacancy rates topping 15%, forcing many to unload their homes into an already overloaded market. Tampa's market isn't just cooling, it's absorbing a direct hit. The dark clouds gathering over the city are bringing something far worse than rain, a widespread erosion of homeowner equity. Number 9. Las Vegas, Nevada. After shaking off Florida's thick humidity, we head west into the desert toward a city famous for high stakes. And ironically, buying a house here right now might be the biggest gamble of all. As you drift from the glitzy strip into the endless suburban neighborhoods, the dazzling neon can't distract from the fractures spreading through the housing market. Vegas has always lived life at the extremes. It thrives during boom periods and crashes hard when the economy shifts. And at this moment, the pendulum is swinging sharply toward the downside. The local job market is tied tightly to tourism and entertainment, industries that depend on Americans having extra money to spend. But as inflation eats into disposable income, both visitors and locals are tightening their wallets, and that pressure is bleeding directly into housing. What makes this downturn feel different is that homeowners can't simply refinance or sell their way out of trouble. Elevated interest rates have essentially trapped many sellers in place. And when you look at fresh listing data, the warning signs become impossible to ignore. Numbers from the Las Vegas Realtors Association show that single-family homes sitting on the market without any offers have jumped more than 35% year over year. That's a massive pileup of inventory in a region where issues like long-term water scarcity already give investors pause. But the most alarming indicator is the growing link between job losses and mortgage stress. As the hospitality and gaming sectors quietly scale back staffing, mortgage delinquencies are starting to rise. Black Knight reports that early-stage delinquencies in Nevada now sit roughly 10% above the national average, a trend that tends to snowball if unemployment continues to climb. Sellers in Vegas are losing negotiating power at a rapid pace. The median sale price has essentially stalled out, and once you factor in inflation, real home values are sliding backwards. Nearly 42% of properties sold last quarter closed for less than the asking price, a dramatic shift from the red-hot bidding wars that dominated the market not long ago. Adding even more weight to the situation, large institutional investors, who own a meaningful portion of Vegas's single-family rentals, have flipped from buyers to net sellers. They're liquidating assets to protect cash positions, injecting additional supply into a market that families simply cannot absorb. Meanwhile, foreclosure activity is beginning to stir again. Atom Data Solutions reports a steady climb in new filings across the region. In a city known for odds and outcomes, the pattern is becoming crystal clear. The house may always win in Las Vegas, but right now, homeowners are the ones taking the losses. Number 8. Nashville, Tennessee. We swing the wheel back toward the center of the country and land in Music City, a place that, not long ago, was riding a wave of nonstop growth. For years, Nashville was humming along thanks to a steady influx of newcomers searching for lower taxes and more affordable living. But as you pass through neighborhoods like the Gulch today, that once lively soundtrack has gone quiet, replaced by a stillness that feels almost unsettling. Nashville's problem is a textbook case of too much supply, colliding head-on with dwindling demand. Developers spent the last several years throwing up high-end condos as if the era of near-free borrowing would last forever. Instead, those builders are now staring at finished units that are sitting vacant, gathering dust. Data from the U.S. Census Bureau shows that Nashville issued more building permits per capita than nearly any other major city in the South. And unfortunately, all that construction is now hitting the market at a time when interest rates are painfully high. The result? A dramatic slowdown in absorption. Local real estate reports show that newly built homes, which once moved quickly, are now lingering for 90 days or more in certain communities. Builders, sensing the shift, have begun dangling incentives that sound increasingly urgent, offers like $30,000 in flex cash or mortgage rate buy-downs of 2 entire percentage points. And still, the inventory continues to balloon. Redfin's latest numbers reveal that total active listings across the Nashville metro have surged by over 45% year over year, one of the steepest spikes anywhere in the country. With so many homes competing for attention, sellers are undercutting one another just to stay in the game, and values are responding exactly as a market saturated with supply tends to do. They're softening. For the first time in about 10 years, the median price per square foot has begun to drift downward. Investors who bought turnkey rentals expecting a steady flow of tourists are discovering that Nashville's short-term rental boom has hit a wall. Revenue per available room is down around 18% from last year, creating a squeeze that many small landlords simply can't withstand. When the rent isn't covering the mortgage, selling becomes the only escape hatch. And that's pushing even more properties onto an already crowded market. Expired listings are also stacking up. More than 20% of homes listed for sale fail to attract a buyer before the listing period ends, a clear sign of demand fatigue. In Nashville, the upbeat growth anthem has faded, replaced by a mournful blues track about falling prices and disappearing equity. Number 7. Denver, Colorado. Our route now takes us northwest into the Rocky Mountains, climbing into Denver's high-altitude skyline, a place where home prices remain lofty, even as the market itself is running out of oxygen. For years, Denver was one of the steadiest appreciation stories in the entire country. But that long, uninterrupted rise has created an affordability canyon that most buyers simply cannot cross. As you make your way through Denver's picturesque neighborhoods, it becomes almost impossible not to ask the obvious question: who can realistically afford to buy here anymore? The chasm between what the typical household earns and what they need to qualify for a median-priced home is wider in Denver than in nearly any other major inland city. This mismatch has essentially paralyzed the market, slowing activity to a near standstill. Fresh numbers from the Denver Metro Association of Realtors show that active listings have ballooned to levels last seen in 2013. Roughly 10,000 homes are now sitting on the market, a figure that has more than doubled in a surprisingly short amount of time. Buyers, meanwhile, are hitting their limit. Mortgage applications across the region have fallen by over 25%, a clear sign that demand isn't just weakening, it has practically dried up. The natural outcome of this imbalance is that sellers are slashing their prices repeatedly in an attempt to stay ahead of the decline. Close-to-list price ratios have dipped below 99%, which means the average homeowner is taking a cut just to close a deal. And while that alone is concerning, the rental market reveals an even more troubling pattern. Because so many would-be sellers are turning into accidental landlords after failing to unload their properties, rental vacancies are climbing. That oversupply is pushing rents downward, and once rental income starts falling, Denver's investment logic crumbles. Cap rates shrink, or even flip negative, making the city far less attractive for investors who once saw it as a sure bet. Seller concessions are also hitting new extremes. More than half of all completed sales now involve the seller paying for repairs, closing costs, or other incentives. The balance of power has shifted completely. Instead of waiving inspections or battling other buyers for the winning offer, today's buyers are setting the terms and getting virtually every item on their wish list. If you're finding value in this deeper, data-focused look at the trends the mainstream outlets tend to ignore, take a moment to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. Number 6. Phoenix, Arizona. We leave the cool mountain air behind and drop back into the desert, this time arriving at ground zero for one of the biggest real estate miscalculations of the decade. Phoenix became the ultimate testing ground for iBuyers like Opendoor and OfferPad, companies that scooped up thousands of homes using algorithms that assumed the market would only move in one direction. Those systems never anticipated a sudden reversal, and now the consequences are playing out block by block. As you make your way through the vast neighborhoods stretching across Maricopa County, you can literally watch these firms unwind their positions. Corporate sellers don't negotiate with emotion. They slash prices quickly because liquidity matters more than preserving neighborhood comps. And when a company dumps inventory, every nearby homeowner feels the hit. It's not uncommon to find streets where every couple of houses has a fresh price reduction sign planted in the yard. Phoenix now ranks among the top cities in the country for price drops. Redfin's latest numbers show that roughly 38% of all sellers have already lowered their asking price just to lure in potential buyers. This isn't happening in a vacuum. It's the direct outcome of a massive inventory buildup. Active listings are sitting at around 18,000 homes, a dangerously high level given how much demand has cooled. But housing pressure in Phoenix goes far beyond listing counts. The overall cost of living has surged. Water scarcity concerns, rising utility bills, and extreme energy use during scorching summers are pushing monthly household expenses higher and higher. When those necessities eat up more of a buyer's income, the amount they can reasonably allocate to a mortgage shrinks, and home prices must adjust downward to match that reality. We're also starting to see distress reappear. While the situation isn't a full-blown crisis yet, the trend is unmistakable. Foreclosure activity is climbing steadily. Atom Data Solutions reports a 20% year-over-year jump in filings throughout the county. Adding to the strain, the investors who once helped fuel Phoenix's pandemic-era boom have all but disappeared. Investor purchases are down over 45%, removing a major layer of demand that had previously pushed home values up by about 50% in just a few years. And with iBuyers retreating as well, the market is now left to stand on its own, exposing just how out of sync prices have become with local incomes. Phoenix is heading toward a significant correction, one that will likely be sharper and more painful than many residents expect. The market must now recalibrate without the artificial lift of corporate cash, and that adjustment won't be gentle. Number 5. Seattle, Washington. Our journey now takes us to the Pacific Northwest, touching down in the damp, tech-saturated landscape of Seattle. This is a housing market unlike most others, because its fortunes rise and fall almost directly with the technology sector. And right now, that sector is trimming its workforce. As we drive past the sprawling campuses of the major tech giants, the atmosphere feels heavy, mirroring the low, overcast skies that Seattle is known for. The days when restricted stock units soared in value and hiring packages grew more extravagant by the quarter have officially come to an end. Along with that shift has gone a huge chunk of the buying power that once propelled Seattle's home prices into the stratosphere. Layoff waves across big employers have produced a psychological shock that has effectively frozen the local housing ladder. People who might have upgraded, downsized, or bought their first home are now choosing to stay put or leave. The numbers coming out of the Northwest Multiple Listing Service highlight how dramatic the slowdown has become. Sales volume is down more than 22% year over year, and the count of pending transactions has fallen to its lowest point in several years. That tells us one thing clearly: the future demand pipeline is drying up. But the biggest force shaping Seattle's downturn is the remote work migration. Tech workers who used to be tied to their cubicles in downtown towers 5 days a week no longer need to live anywhere near them. Many are opting for cheaper suburbs or entirely different states where a mortgage doesn't require stretching every dollar. This outward flow of residents is shrinking the buyer pool within King County. And census data confirms that the metro's population is actually declining, an extremely bearish signal for housing values. Price corrections in Seattle have struck with unusual speed. According to the Case-Shiller Index, local home prices have dropped faster from their peak than in nearly any other major U.S. city, down roughly 10% in nominal terms, and even steeper once you adjust for inflation. The luxury segment is also hitting a wall. Properties listed above $2 million are now lingering on the market for close to 60 days on average, acquiring a stigma that makes them even harder to move. And here's the harsh truth: when the luxury tier freezes, the cold eventually seeps into every other price category. With ongoing tech layoffs fueling uncertainty, the confidence needed to take on a massive mortgage simply isn't there. Seattle is undergoing a dramatic shift, from a place where sellers once called every shot to a landscape where buyers hold the leverage but still hesitate to act. The transformation from a seller's dream to a buyer's graveyard is already underway. Number 4. Boise, Idaho. We now make our way inland to the city that became the poster child for the remote work frenzy. Boise wasn't just a hot market during the pandemic, it was the market, the place where prices soared at a pace that defied gravity. And just like any extreme high, the come down has been abrupt and punishing. As you drive through Boise's quiet, meticulously planned subdivisions, you can almost feel the echo of the boom that once electrified the area. Practically the entire surge was powered by out-of-state buyers, especially Californians, bringing enormous equity with them. That migration stream has slowed to a trickle, and when the external money dried up, the market lost the fuel that had propelled it upward. Local residents had already been priced out long ago, and with remote workers no longer flooding in, there's simply no buyer base left to justify the valuations. Researchers at Florida Atlantic University identified Boise as the most overvalued housing market in the country, at one point estimating it was priced more than 70% above its fundamental value. That kind of disconnect always snaps back eventually, and Boise's correction has arrived with force. Current data from Ada County shows median home prices have dropped by roughly 15% from their peak, and everything suggests the slide isn't over yet. Inventory has surged to dire levels, with the number of homes for sale tripling compared to just 2 years ago. Many homeowners who assumed they were sitting on a small fortune are now realizing they're holding a rapidly depreciating asset. Every month they delay listing. Their equity erodes even further. The most brutal part of the downturn is unfolding in the new construction sector. Builders who launched spec homes during the pandemic are now unloading them at deep discounts simply to clear debt. It's not uncommon to see price cuts of $50,000, $80,000, or even $100,000 on brand new builds. These fire sale prices wreak havoc on neighborhood comps. If a builder offloads a pristine home for $500,000, the older house next door is no longer worth the $550,000 its owner once believed. The entire market is dragged downward together. This dynamic creates a race to the bottom, a downward spiral from which Boise has not yet emerged.
Number 3. San Francisco, California. We head back toward the Pacific coast and cross the iconic Golden Gate Bridge, entering a city that is confronting something far more severe than a routine housing downturn. San Francisco isn't just facing a market correction. It's grappling with what many are calling a full-blown urban doom loop. As we wind through the city's famously steep hills, the evidence of strain is everywhere. Long dark storefronts, silent office buildings that once buzzed with tech workers, and neighborhoods struggling to maintain their former vitality. The commercial real estate collapse in San Francisco is nothing short of dramatic, and its shockwaves are hammering the residential market. When the economic heartbeat of downtown weakens, the surrounding communities inevitably lose their draw. Office vacancy rates in the city's core have soared past 30%, an unprecedented level. And this isn't a trivial statistic. Without workers commuting in daily, the restaurants, shops, transit systems, and service providers that keep urban life vibrant start to wither. When the ecosystem collapses, the desirability of living nearby drops off a cliff. The residential numbers reflect the same deterioration. The California Association of Realtors reports that home sales in San Francisco have plunged by more than 25%, and the decline in pricing is even more striking. Median condo prices are down over 12% year over year, wiping out years of accumulated equity for homeowners who once believed this market was bulletproof. A combination of factors is driving people away: concerns about public safety, rising homelessness, a thinning job market, and the simple realization that high housing costs no longer match the city's quality of life. Migration data shows tens of thousands of residents leaving, and with every departed household, the city's tax base shrinks. That drop in revenue makes it harder to maintain essential services, deepening the cycle of decline. Layer on high interest rates and a slowdown in the tech industry, once the economic engine that spared San Francisco from previous downturns, and the market has virtually no support system left. The result is painful. Some luxury homes are selling at prices $1 million below what they commanded just a few years ago. For many homeowners, this looks less like a correction and more like surrender. I'd love to hear your perspective on this unraveling. Would you consider buying into San Francisco now, hoping for a rebound, or do you believe the city's best days are behind it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Number 2. Austin, Texas. Next, we head south into the Lone Star State and arrive in the city that was once marketed as the next great tech capital, Austin. But the reality on the ground today looks very different. Austin is experiencing the sharpest home price correction of any major U.S. metro. And as you drive past the sprawling subdivisions on the city's outskirts, the scope of the overbuilding becomes impossible to ignore. Austin simply expanded too aggressively. Developers pumped out entire neighborhoods under the assumption that tech-fueled demand would grow indefinitely. Instead, all that supply is now hitting the market at the exact wrong moment. In suburban areas, available and for sale signs seem to pop up at nearly every intersection, creating a visual map of oversupply. Zillow's numbers make the situation even clearer. Housing inventory in the Austin metro area is about 40% higher than it was before the pandemic, a staggering overshoot. Sellers aren't just competing against each other, they're competing against thousands of brand new homes that builders are eager, even desperate, to unload. The result is an environment where prices are dropping, and dropping fast. The median sale price in Austin is down nearly 10% year over year, the steepest decline in the nation. This isn't some mild adjustment, it's a complete reevaluation of what Austin real estate is actually worth. And just like in Seattle and San Francisco, the tech slowdown is amplifying the pain. Companies such as Tesla and Oracle, which once generated huge excitement when they relocated here, are dialing back their hiring plans. With fewer high-income workers pouring into the city, the demand that once justified sky-high home prices is fading. Homes that attracted dozens of offers during the 2021 buying mania are now sitting vacant for 100 days or more without so much as a nibble. The rental market isn't offering relief either. Rents are down roughly 6%, which pushes investors who bought at peak prices into financial stress. And for many, the only way out is selling into a falling market. To make matters worse, Texas's notoriously high property taxes are turning a bad situation into something even more painful. Homeowners are paying taxes based on inflated assessments from the boom era, even though their property values are now slipping backward. That imbalance strains budgets and adds pressure to sell. Austin is the classic definition of a real-time bubble bursting, a reminder that even in a state known for big dreams and endless land, growth has limits. The market is desperately searching for equilibrium, and it still hasn't found the bottom. Number 1. San Jose, California. We wrap up our journey right where the modern tech era took root, deep in the center of Silicon Valley. San Jose claims the top spot on this list for one simple reason. The sheer amount of money evaporating here is almost unbelievable. This is the priciest housing market in the entire country, and right now it is entering a deep freeze. As you glide through these tranquil neighborhoods, where even a plain single-story ranch home commands a $2 million price tag, the quiet feels unsettling. Everything in this market is tied to stock-based wealth, and with the tech sector bouncing between layoffs and volatility, that wealth effect has essentially disappeared. Residents may own valuable homes on paper, but many are strapped for liquid cash, creating a very real squeeze. The affordability math here isn't just bad, it's broken beyond repair. To qualify for a median-priced home in today's San Jose market, a buyer needs an annual income approaching $450,000, a threshold that wipes out almost 99% of potential purchasers. With so few households able to participate, sales activity has completely cratered. Transaction volume is running about 40% below normal, a signal that the market has slipped into a kind of dysfunction. Homeowners are stuck as well. Many refinanced into ultra-low mortgage rates during the boom, and they refuse to trade a 3% rate for one closer to 7%, creating a lock-in effect that restricts inventory. But the lack of listings isn't a sign of strength, far from it. Despite tight supply, demand has fallen so sharply that prices are sliding anyway. Monthly mortgage payments tell the story clearly. Buyers here are staring at $14,000 per month payments on average, a cost that strains even senior engineers earning six-figure salaries. And underneath all of this lurks a unique kind of foreclosure risk. If the tech downturn deepens and high-income earners face long periods without work, the properties heading into distress won't be modest starter homes. They'll be multi-million-dollar estates. Once those begin hitting the market, comparable values could collapse overnight. San Jose is the pinnacle of the pandemic housing bubble, which means it also has the longest distance to fall. When the titans of the tech world sneeze, this market doesn't just catch a cold, it ends up flat on its back. And here's the broader lesson. The housing market isn't a single unified entity. It's a patchwork of thousands of regional ecosystems, each reacting differently to economic stress. The 10 cities we explored today aren't outliers. They're previewing what may unfold across the rest of the country. The so-called crash of 2026 isn't some future storm on the horizon. For millions of Americans, it's already happening right outside their front door. If this road trip gave you a clearer picture of what's really happening, take a moment to like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments, share it with anyone considering a home purchase, and subscribe for more unfiltered economic insights. Thanks for coming along, and drive safely out there.